Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through the back alleys of a medieval town. The air smells like soot, turnip stew, and the distant whiff of livestock that definitely aren't supposed to be this close to the city. Your cloak's pulled tight, your heartbeat is loud in your ears, and in your shaking hands a loaf of bread that wasn't technically yours, or even slightly yours. And now you hear footsteps. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It seemed like such a simple thing: sneak into the baker's stall after dark, grab a still warm loaf, and vanish like a ghost. But medieval cities were not forgiving to ghosts. The cobblestones are loud, the watchmen are grumpier than a badger in a bath, and there are always more people awake than you expect. You duck into a side street and crouch behind a stack of firewood, your stomach's growling like a drunk bear, but you don't dare take a bite. If they catch you, it's not just a scolding, it's stocks, lashes, or worse. Because here in the 13th century, stealing food isn't seen as desperation, it's seen as defiance. In this world, thievery is not a crime against a person, it's a sin against order itself. Cities run on the delicate illusion of safety. One missing pie tolerated, but start a trend. Suddenly, the entire market square turns into a paranoia-fueled reenactment of Catch That Peasant. Historians still debate how harsh these penalties really were. Some records suggest local authorities leaned toward leniency when hunger was involved. Others show that even minor theft could lead to brutal consequences, especially if the crowd was already riled up or the victim was someone important. Spoiler: the baker's cousin is the sheriff's nephew. Of course he is. You run now, loaf tucked under your tunic, and as you skid around a corner, you remember a tale you once overheard: a boy caught stealing onions. Not gold, not coins, not even wine. Onions. He was tied to a post and pelted with them until he passed out, and not gently. That was the thing about medieval punishments: they were weirdly poetic. They liked a theme: steal bread. You might be forced to carry a sack of moldy loaves through the streets. Rob a chicken. You could be paraded around with feathers glued to your skin. One poor soul, accused of stealing a goose, was tied to a stake with the goose still honking angrily next to him. Frankly, the goose seemed more vengeful than the crowd. Of course, sometimes the punishment was more permanent: lose a hand, get branded with a hot iron, or in some towns, have your ear nailed to the market post. Yes, nailed. And then you had to decide: stay there all day, or tear it free yourself. Either way, you'd hear jokes about it for years. But the thing that really sticks with you, as you hide under a broken cart now, is that you didn't even consider this stealing. You were hungry. You hadn't eaten in days. The fields were dry, the coins non-existent, and no one hires a farmhand when the harvest fails. The town seems rich to you, people walking past with fur-trimmed cloaks, boots with actual soles, and children licking honey off fingers like they've never felt cold. They don't look like you. They don't smell like desperation. And so the line between mine and yours starts to blur. That was common. Most thieves in medieval times weren't master criminals or organized gangs. They were poor, displaced, orphans, widows, people on the edge, people like you. And yet society treated them like predators, not survivors. Quirky detail: some towns used wooden collars, called shame boards, where the thief had to wear a sign around their neck stating exactly what they stole and from whom. Imagine spending 3 days with "I took 2 turnips from Greta" dangling off your chin. Greta, naturally, walks past every hour, just to glare. And the worst part, This might not be your first time, but it'll be your last for a while, at least. You hear the heavy boots now. The watchman's voice echoes down the alley. You freeze. You think of running. You don't. You know how this goes. They find you, haul you up by the collar, and toss you into the nearest holding pit. It's damp. It stinks of mildew and worse. And someone in the corner is whispering nursery rhymes with oddly violent twists. The loaf falls apart in your lap. Not because you ate it, but because it's been crushed in your hands this whole time. And as the door slams shut and the torchlight fades, you wonder not why you stole, but why it feels like you're the only one who ever gets punished for it. It starts to dawn on you, in the damp chill of the holding cell, that maybe the worst part of being a thief isn't the punishment, it's the feeling that the rules were never made for you in the first place. You didn't choose to live like this. You were born into a world with lords and laws and walls you're not allowed to enter unless you're carrying something or bleeding. Because let's be honest, who really gets to decide what stealing means? Take bread from a market stall, and you're a criminal. But take a village's land through royal decree, and suddenly you're a nobleman with a crest. Historians still argue whether medieval law truly protected the common folk, or just served as a velvet rope for the wealthy. The truth, if you had a title, a ring, or the right friends, you could acquire just about anything livestock, vineyards, entire villages, and call it justice. You, on the other hand, steal a chicken and suddenly it's disturbing the peace. You are, in every legal sense, the dangerous element. The town crier had shouted it just last week. Order must be maintained, as if the peasants were the ones knocking over society. Meanwhile, the tax collector accidentally took double from half the tenants, and no one dared say a word. Your cellmate is an older woman named Elna. She's missing 3 teeth and has opinions about everything, especially the mayor's dog. She tells you she was arrested for picking apples from a tree her family used for generations. The orchard was sold last year to a merchant's cousin. Technically, the apples are his now. Technically, her breakfast was theft. Elna shrugs. It's only stealing when we do it, she says. Out in the wider world, the definition of theft could get stretchy. Sometimes people were branded thieves for picking up a dropped coin, or borrowing a neighbor's tools for too long. In certain regions, taking driftwood from a noble's riverbank could get you fined or whipped, depending on the wood. A whole set of fines existed for unauthorized gleaning, which basically meant collecting leftover grain after harvest. The leftovers. The bits the birds didn't want. Meanwhile, lords regularly seized livestock from tenant farmers as interest, and those farmers were expected to thank them for it. One poor soul in Yorkshire lost his entire flock to a visiting knight who claimed they were making too much noise near the road. The only thing louder was the silence from the local court. Quirky detail, some towns kept an official thief stick. If someone accused you of stealing and handed you the stick, you had to swear innocence while holding it. Drop the stick or hesitate. And that was it. Guilt confirmed. The logic, if your soul was pure, you'd be calm. If not, your hands would shake. Never mind if you just had low blood sugar or a squirrel ran by. But justice wasn't just about class. It was about timing, politics, gossip. If you were liked, the town might defend you. If you weren't well, best not to sneeze too loudly during a sermon. You think back to that time when the baker himself had shorted a noble on flour. Everyone laughed. Bold old Carol, they said, giving the Duke what he deserves. Carol wasn't arrested. He got free ale for a week, same theft, different direction. You notice now that the stones of the cell aren't just damp, they're cracked, covered in soot. and inscribed with names. Dozens of names. Some etched deeply, some half vanished. You run your finger across one and realize this isn't a place for justice. It's a storage shed for the forgotten, a waiting room for punishment, no matter how small the sin. And yet, people still steal. They steal because they're hungry, because they're cold, because someone else has 5 cloaks and they have none, because fairness is a myth with good PR. You ask Elna if she regrets it, the apples. She laughs. No, but I regret getting caught. She pulls a crust from her tunic, breaks it in half, and offers you the larger piece. You didn't steal that, you ask. She winks. Course not. I just found it, somewhere it wasn't mine. And you both chew in silence, the taste of stolen or found bread somehow sweeter in the dark. The door creaks open at dawn, letting in a thin sliver of light and the unmistakable stench of wet hay and cooked cabbage. You're pulled to your feet, half asleep and fully stiff, and shoved into the courtyard where justice is apparently doled out before breakfast. The town watch doesn't say much. They don't have to. Their job isn't to think it's to escort. You're paraded past yawning shopkeepers, groggy children, and a goat that looks more judgmental than the mayor ever could. Elna mutters something under her breath about show trials and show ponies. You believe her. The only thing missing is a juggler and a pie to the face. But today, you're lucky, or so they say. The magistrate decides against mutilation, imprisonment, or branding. Instead, he assigns you to the night watch as punishment. You're to spend the next 2 weeks patrolling the town after sunset. You wonder if you're being punished or recruited. Either way, you now belong to the small and perpetually exhausted band of men known as the Night Watch. Congratulations. You have a job. It doesn't pay. The first thing you learn, the job is terrible. You walk through pitch-black alleys lit only by a weak torch that smokes more than it shines. The second thing you learn, the torch is probably more afraid of the dark than you are. Every shadow looks like a mugger. Every mugger is probably a rat. Every rat is suspiciously large. Historians still argue about how effective these medieval town watches were. Some describe them as valiant protectors of public order. Others point out that many were just bored conscripts like you, untrained, poorly equipped, and often half asleep, occasionally drunk, sometimes all three. The Night Watch's main duties include announcing the hour, checking for fires, and shouting vaguely threatening phrases like, "All is well," even when it very much isn't. You're given a stick, not a sword, not a mace, just a long stick and a bell. You're told to avoid engaging with criminals unless absolutely necessary. You're also told that if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. The town itself is a maze at night. Roads curve unexpectedly. Doors creak even when there's no wind. You swear one street grows longer the more you walk it. And then there are the cats. Hundreds of them. Judging, watching, possibly plotting. Your fellow watchmen are a mixed bunch, old Jaren, who swears he once wrestled a thief using only his beard, a boy named Rafe who's far too enthusiastic about poking things with his stick, and a man called Mouse, who speaks only in rhymes and once mistook a potato sack for a bandit. You feel safer alone. And then, one night, you catch a thief. Or rather, you stumble into one. He's rooting through a fruit cart with all the stealth of a sneeze in a church. He sees you. You see him. There's a long pause. Then he throws an apple at your face and runs. You give chase not because you're brave, but because you're not sure what else to do. Your bell jingles obnoxiously with every step. Your stick gets caught on a fence. You trip over a chicken. The thief disappears. You limp back to your patrol route, covered in bruises and poultry feathers, wondering how anyone ever survives this job. Quirky tidbit in some towns. The night watch was expected to carry a horn, a dog, and a ladder, yes. A ladder because sometimes your job was also to chase cats off roofs or retrieve hats stuck in chimneys. The line between law enforcement and handyman was blurry at best. By the end of the week, you've learned to tell when someone is about to steal. There's a twitch to the hand, a glance, the subtle dance of guilt and hope. You see yourself in their movements. You were that twitch once. One night, you spot a girl slipping a loaf of bread under her cloak. She sees you. You see her. You say nothing. She runs. You let her go. You know exactly how cold that cell is. The next morning, you're summoned by the magistrate. Not because you let the girl go, no one saw that. No. Today's drama is different. The town wants entertainment, and they've chosen their preferred show, public humiliation. Punishment in the medieval world wasn't always about pain. Sometimes it was about theater. Because what's the point of catching a thief if the whole town doesn't get to watch them cry in the town square? You're told to assist in today's disciplinary proceedings, a fancy phrase for tying someone to a wooden post and inviting the community to laugh. You arrive in the square, and there he is, the criminal. He looks about 15, maybe younger, and his crime, he stole 2 eggs and a comb from a merchant's stall. Maybe he was planning an omelet in a stylish look. Maybe he was just hungry and itchy. The punishment, he's to be placed in the stocks with a placard, "I am a greedy fool who steals from honest men." You glance at the crowd. Children giggle. Adults scoff. One woman throws an onion. You think of Elna. You think of yourself. You think of how easy it is to make a human into a joke. Historians still debate the purpose of these punishments. Some argue they were community rituals meant to reinforce values. Others see them as a form of collective cruelty, a way for powerless people to feel powerful for one brief, smug afternoon. Either way, it worked. Shame was a tool, and in many towns, it was preferred to prison. The medieval justice system loved variety. You never quite knew what flavor of punishment you were going to get. There was the pillory, where your head and hands stuck out for birds and rude jokes. There were ducking stools, used mostly for women accused of gossip, witchcraft, or just having opinions. And of course, the ever-reliable scarlet letter, not embroidered, painted directly onto your clothes or forehead. There was once a man punished for stealing a spoon who was forced to wear a giant wooden spoon around his neck for a week. He later became a minor local celebrity. People called him Sir Spoon. A tavern was named after him. Justice is weird like that. Back in the square, you're handed a bucket of rotten vegetables. You're expected to participate. You don't, You stand beside the stocks like a post. The boy doesn't cry. He doesn't look at anyone. He just stares straight ahead, as if trying to memorize the shape of the clouds. Maybe if he stares hard enough, he'll forget that people are pointing and laughing at him for stealing something they throw out daily. Quirky detail in some towns. Punishment included mock rides, forcing thieves to ride backwards on a donkey while people jeered. If the crowd was feeling particularly poetic, they'd dress you as the thing you stole. A woman who took wool once had to wear an outfit made entirely of yarn. It unraveled the whole way through town. You start to understand that these punishments weren't really about justice. They were about rhythm, predictability, a little ritual to break up the monotony of daily medieval life. Wake up, tend your goats, punish a thief, stew some cabbage. That night, back on patrol, you see the boy again. He's been released, but the placard hangs limply from his shoulder still. No one told him to remove it. Maybe no one will. You think of how easy it is to brand someone, not with fire, but with memory, with whispers, with laughter that doesn't fade. And as your torch burns low and the cobblestones echo beneath your steps, you wonder how many people in this town walk bent not from age, but from shame they didn't deserve. You're starting to notice something odd about your nightly patrols. It's not the eerie quiet of the back streets, or the occasional barn owl giving you side-eye from a rooftop. It's the realization that the prison wasn't the worst part, not by a long shot. The real punishment, walking the streets after dark and seeing the desperate look in people's eyes, people who know exactly what you know, and pretend they don't. Take tonight, for instance. You're passing a tavern where someone's singing out of tune, badly. The window shutters are cracked open. Inside, a group of men are dicing loudly, roaring with laughter. Cloaks lined with fox fur and bellies lined with ale. You glance down at your own stick and hand-me-down cloak. You smell like wet wood. They smell like meat. It's a whole different universe just 5 feet away. There's a man slumped against a barrel across the street. He waves you over, asking if you're still part of the honest ones. You don't know how to answer that. He offers you a stolen apple. You take it. He tells you his name is Hob. He used to be a cooper, made barrels for wine, fish, pickled onions, whatever. But a fire wiped out his workshop, and the noble who owned the land decided not to rebuild. Hob had to relocate, which in this context meant beg, borrow, or steal. Mostly steel, mostly food, occasionally firewood. Once, embarrassingly, a comb. He laughs when he says it. Didn't even have enough hair to justify it. Historians still debate whether most medieval thieves were opportunists or victims. Many were displaced laborers, people like Hob, forced into criminality by famine, disease, or lords who decided they'd rather raise sheep than keep tenants. The enclosures in England, for example, turned entire villages into ghost towns. The land cleared for wool, and the people cleared along with it. You learn that Hob is what's known as a barrel squatter. He literally sleeps in an old broken cask near the edge of town. It's drafty, smelly, but better than ditches, better than the town jail. Sometimes, he tells you about the time he was caught stealing salted fish from the wharf. The guards didn't even arrest him, they just beat him with the dried fish until it broke. He says he still flinches when he smells mackerel. You ask him why he keeps stealing. He shrugs. Because I can't knit socks, and nobody pays for old stories. That's the thing. There's no plan, no grand outlaw scheme, no mastermind thief guilds, not for people like Hob. That's a myth, probably cooked up by nobles who needed to believe crime came from somewhere organized and not from the broken edges of their own systems. Sure, there were black markets, but they weren't glamorous dens of sin. They were cold alleys where someone sold old onions at midnight for half a crust. Sometimes you'd get a deal. Sometimes you'd get punched. Sometimes both. Quirky detail in some places, thieves developed a sign language of sorts, a mixture of winks, coughs, and hand gestures to identify each other or signal danger. It wasn't exactly elegant. One town outlawed excessive blinking for this reason. Yes, really. You walk Hob back to his barrel and realize he's probably going to steal again tonight. Not because he wants to, because he will, eventually, get hungry. And hunger is louder than shame. The worst part, he'll probably get caught again, and no one will remember the fire, or the broken shop, or the salted fish beating. They'll just call him a thief, maybe laugh, maybe throw something. It's a cycle, and cycles don't care about fairness. You leave him with a nod, unsure if that makes you complicit or just tired. That night, you can't sleep. You keep thinking about how easy it is to fall out of society and how impossible it is to climb back in. All it takes is one missed harvest, one storm, one misstep, one apple. You're starting to realize something else now. Something so obvious you can't believe it took this long to click. It isn't just what you steal that matters, it's who you are when you steal it. Because not all thieves are treated equally. Some, it turns out, never get called thieves at all. Like that merchant's son who got caught borrowing coins from the collection box at the local church. He was scolded, firmly, over dinner, by candlelight, then sent on a pilgrimage to reflect. No stocks, no crowds, no buckets of spoiled vegetables. Just a scenic walk to a monastery and a new pair of boots. Or the baron who seized 3 farms last winter when the families couldn't meet their rent. Legally, they had another month. But the baron needed the land for hunting dogs. He now hosts feasts there, where wild boar is served on silver plates. People nod politely. No one mentions the eviction. Historians still argue how rigid the medieval legal system truly was. Some believe the laws were laid out clearly and followed diligently. Others point out the glaring loopholes that seem to benefit the wealthy with suspicious consistency. The same law might cut off your hand for stealing a chicken, but quietly overlook a noble appropriating an entire fishing village. You patrol past the manorial hall now. A faint golden light spills from the windows, and you hear music flutes, maybe a lute, someone singing about roses and knights. You also hear laughter, the kind that costs money. You're not invited. Inside, they're probably drinking from pewter goblets and pretending not to notice the servants sweating over roast lamb in the back. None of those lambs were paid for. Technically, they were offered out of respect, of course. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, nobles could get away with theft under the concept of right of necessity. If they claimed they took something for the good of the realm, or even just the good of their household, it was excused. That's a handy law to have when you control who gets punished. You turn a corner and pass an elderly man selling onions from a cart. He's asleep, head on his chest, snoring gently. You notice his coin pouch sitting unattended beside him. Just sitting there. No guards, no locks, no witnesses. You stare at it for longer than you should. You don't take it. You keep walking, feeling strangely sad that you even thought about it. Later that night, you come across a commotion in the square. 2 boys have been caught stealing apples. You're told to hold them until morning. One of them is barefoot. His tunic is torn. The other keeps rubbing his eye like he's too tired to understand what's happening. There may be 10, maybe... Someone in the crowd mutters that it's a shame used to be good boys. Someone else says they're just like their father. You're guessing their father is either dead or equally poor. The mayor's assistant insists they be put in the stocks come morning. You ask if that's really necessary. You get a look. The kind of look that says, "This is not your decision." And it isn't. So you sit with the boys on the cold stone steps of the guard post, offering them water, trying to make them laugh. They don't. But they lean against you, both of them, half asleep, small heads on your arms like sackcloth pillows. And in that moment, you realize thieves aren't born. They're raised by hunger, by fear, by a world that always seems to give just enough hope to survive, but never enough to rest. By now, you've learned to recognize a thief before they even lift a finger. Not because you're some seasoned investigator, but because there's a look, wide eyes, scanning exits. Fingers twitching at nothing. A heartbeat just a little too loud in the quiet of the street. But lately, something else has caught your attention. Some of the people being dragged into the jailhouse or publicly punished don't look like thieves at all. Or rather, they don't fit the profile you've started building in your head. There's an older woman with herbs in her satchel, accused of stealing a baby's health. There's a traveler whose only crime was being somewhere when something went missing. There's a boy who drew pictures of the mayor's house in the dirt and got labeled a spy. Theft, it seems, is becoming a much more flexible concept. You start to notice that some people are simply too different to be trusted. They speak with strange accents. They wear clothes a little too colorful, or keep odd pets. One man was arrested for owning a monkey, which someone claimed was a demon. The monkey stole a turnip, or so the story goes. Historians still argue about the overlap between theft accusations and broader suspicions of magic, foreignness, or simply being inconvenient. In many cases, accusations of theft were stand-ins for bigger fears: witches stealing the night, travelers stealing children, women stealing men's power. The medieval mind didn't always separate the literal from the symbolic. You remember the case of Ilsa, a midwife who helped deliver babies in the outskirts of town. One of the wealthier families accused her of stealing a family heirloom. There was no proof, but Ilsa wore strange amulets, and people whispered. So she was dragged to court. She didn't protest much. She just stood there, arms crossed, and asked the judge if he wanted his next child-born breech. They let her go, barely. But not everyone got that lucky. The town keeps a list of suspicious persons, a parchment longer than your arm, updated weekly by someone who clearly enjoys quill work far too much. The list includes an old man who talks to trees, a girl who sings in Latin when she thinks no one's watching, and a man with a limp who once lived in another country. Several of them have already been accused of petty theft. One is now missing entirely. Quirky detail: in some regions, a thief could be identified by physical traits: long fingers, close-set eyes, a mole in the wrong place. Towns had profilers long before the concept existed. Only theirs involved phrenology and superstition. A man with two differently colored eyes was once jailed simply for having the look of deceit. You try not to think about your own eyes. One of them twitches when you're tired. Does that count? As you patrol, you notice the shift. Theft becomes shorthand. It's easier to accuse someone of stealing than of simply being strange. The baker doesn't like a rival, he's stealing customers. A jealous neighbor thinks your herbs grow too well, you must be stealing their sunlight. The jail begins to fill not just with hungry hands, but with odd souls. Storytellers, healers, wanderers. Anyone who doesn't fit inside the clean, predictable mold the town wants to believe it is. And you, walking these streets each night, start to feel like you're guarding a lie. You think back to that thief stick you heard about, the one that judged you if your hand shook. Seems the whole town is holding a thief stick now, and everyone's being judged by the way they walk, speak, or simply look back. That night, you pass a child scribbling chalk on a stone wall. You squint to read it. Just two words. Who decides? You walk past, you don't erase it. Not yet. It's raining tonight. Not the dramatic kind with thunder and shrieking wind, just a dull, soaking drizzle that seeps into your boots and makes everything smell faintly of mildew and regret. Your torch hisses at the damp, and you swear it's getting shorter by the second. It's the kind of weather that makes crime seem like too much effort. But still, the streets aren't empty. You find yourself near the tannery, a part of town that even the rats avoid. And that's saying something, because you've seen rats in the cathedral. But here, the stench is enough to pickle your soul. And in this foul-smelling corner of civilization, you spot a small group huddled beneath a broken awning. They're passing something between them, a small satchel, exchanged with the subtlety of a brick through glass. You step closer. The satchel changes hands again. This time, it's pressed into the fingers of a boy who looks too clean for the company he keeps. You know what this is? It's not bread. It's not apples. It's spice. Not cinnamon, mind you. Not the kind that gets tossed on porridge. This is poppy resin, powdered henbane, crushed datura leaves wrapped in cloth like some medieval energy drink. This is what people chew when they want to forget where they are, what they've done, or how many cold nights lie ahead. Historians still argue how widespread the use of psychoactive substances really was in the medieval world. Some say it was ritualistic, tied to shamanic traditions or monastic visions. Others suggest it was more common than we think, especially among the desperate, the curious, or the simply bored. The church, for the record, didn't like it. Altering your mind was considered dangerous unless you were a saint. Then it was holy. You approach the group slowly, and the boy freezes. The others vanish into the mist like a magician's assistants who never got paid. You crouch down beside him. He doesn't run. He just looks embarrassed. You ask his name. He says it's Denny. You ask what's in the satchel. He shrugs. Dream dust. He whispers. It's not even a euphemism. That's what they call it. Crushed poppy mixed with wine residue, rolled in flower petals and dried in the sun. You're supposed to sprinkle it into soup or tea, or, if you're really desperate, eat it raw. It doesn't heal. It just dulls. Denny explains that his mother used it when her back went out. His brother took it when his leg was broken in the harvest accident. And now Denny takes it when he can't sleep, or when he wakes up crying and doesn't know why. You don't arrest him. Instead, you sit beside him. You let the rain soak your shoulders. You ask him where he gets it, and he tells you there's a woman named Mira who lives beyond the east wall. She's older than the town itself, or so they say. She makes the dust. She also makes salves, elixirs, and soup that could raise the dead, or at least a farmer with gout. You ask if she's dangerous. He shrugs again. Only if you ask for too much. Quirky tidbit: in some medieval texts, poppy is referred to as sleep's whisper or night's velvet. It was praised by herbalists and condemned by priests. One abbey even tried to grow it secretly behind the chapel. The abbot claimed it was for the bees. The bees were never questioned. You tell Denny to go home. He nods, slowly, and disappears into the drizzle. Later that night, you find yourself wondering about Mira, about how many people are out there quietly surviving with help from plants that grow between the cracks in the cobblestones. You think about how the law is slow, but pain isn't. How relief often arrives in strange packages: dust, leaves, petals, stolen smiles. And you realize something unsettling. The real problem isn't that people are stealing. It's that life gives them so little that stealing feels like mercy. You don't plan on visiting Mira, the old healer beyond the east wall, but somehow your feet carry you there anyway. Blame curiosity, or the rain, or Denny's sad eyes. The guards pretend not to notice you slipping past the broken gate at the edge of town. Or maybe they just know better than to question someone heading into the woods at dusk. It's a short walk, though it feels like you're crossing into another world. The trees are thick and heavy. The air smells of moss and thyme. And every step makes your boots squelch just enough to remind you how ungraceful you are. Her cottage appears like something out of a forgotten dream: stone walls blanketed with ivy, smoke curling from a crooked chimney, a door painted a color you can't quite name. You knock once. No answer. You knock again. The door creaks open before your knuckles even touch it. Mira is exactly how you'd expect: a tangle of gray hair, eyes like chipped glass, and hands stained with 100 herbs. She doesn't ask why you're here. She simply gestures to a bench by the hearth and pours you something warm that smells vaguely like mushrooms and regret. You sit, you sip, you wait. Eventually, she speaks another one who thinks he's not a thief. You choke slightly. She smirks. Everyone steals, she continues. Time, hope, kindness. A little food here, a lie there. Doesn't matter if you wear boots or chains. Historians still argue whether women like Mira were persecuted more for their healing or their independence. Some see them as folk doctors vital to rural survival. Others note the pattern too skilled, too solitary, and too female. That's when the whispers start. Whispers. Mira explains that most of her illicit remedies are just plants no one bothers to learn anymore. The dream dust poppy and plum ash, her cough syrup honey, onion, and old monk's wine. The guards know. They come when their knees ache. They don't arrest her. They just don't speak of it. You ask why she does it? She shrugs. Because they need it, and because I don't care if it's legal. Then she fixes her eyes on you sharp, unwavering. But I also know the price. Everything stolen carries a cost, even comfort. You think of Denny again, of Hob, of the apple you didn't take, of the bread you did. Quirky tidbit in medieval France. Herbalists were sometimes registered with the local guild right alongside butchers and bakers. But if they cured too many incurable cases, that's when the inquisitors started sniffing around. There was a fine line between miracle and menace. Mira hands you a small pouch of dried petals. For sleep, she says. No more than a pinch, unless you want to talk to your ancestors. You pocket it, unsure if you'll ever use it. When you finally leave, the rain has stopped. The woods feel quieter, less judgmental. Back inside the walls, the town feels too loud, too angular, too convinced of its own righteousness. You pass a man beating rugs outside his door and flinch instinctively at the rhythm. You pass a guard laughing at a woman trying to sell wilted lettuce and feel your teeth clench. You think again of Mira's words, everyone steals. You realize she's right. Even you, or maybe especially you. You return to your rounds like nothing happened. Torch in hand, boots scraping damp stone. But something inside has shifted. You're no longer just a watcher. You're a witness. And that's heavier than any weapon. Tonight, the town square is empty, too quiet. Even for this hour, the air smells of boiled cabbage and secrets. Then you hear it, a soft sobbing, barely audible over the wind. You follow the sound behind the church, past the shrine with the broken saint statue. There, curled into the base of a rain barrel, is a boy no older than 9, cradling a loaf of bread. You sigh. Not again. You squat beside him. He flinches. It's not mine, he says. I swear. I just found it. You nod, because you've heard every version of that sentence. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's not. Most times, it doesn't matter. His name is Tom. He used to live with his aunt, but she got sick and went quiet. Now he sleeps in the stable when the horses don't mind. The bread, he took it from the monastery kitchens. He waited until the cook turned his back. You ask him why he risked it. I was hungry, he says, and it smelled like not being sad. There's a pause long enough for the rain to consider returning. You don't take the bread, you let him eat. Historians still debate whether monastic theft was treated more harshly because of the religious context. Some abbeys punished with lashes. Others saw it as a moral failing to be corrected through fasting, an ironic penalty for someone who stole food. But then again, the monastic kitchens often had more food than entire villages. Monks brewed beer, raised pigs, and hoarded fish like holy dragons. The line between holy feast and hoarding wasn't always clear. As Tom eats, you think about the monastery's golden goblets, the silver candlesticks, the polished floors. You once slipped on one. It was hilarious, in retrospect. You also think about how their records, meticulously written by ink-stained brothers, will mention the theft of one loaf, but not the night someone like Tom slept outside their gates. You take him to the guard post, not for jail, but warmth. You hand him off to the old woman who sweeps the steps and knows how to make tea that tastes like hay and honey. She doesn't ask questions. She wraps him in a scratchy blanket. You sit there for a while, watching the fire crackle in the hearth, listening to the wind outside trying to make up its mind. Quirky detail in some medieval cities, bakeries had hunger stones carved with lines to measure flour rations. When famine hit, the stones told everyone how little they deserved. Some stones survive today, etched with warnings: if you see me, weep. You wonder if there's a hunger stone inside you, a part that measures not what you have, but what you lack, or what you've lost. Tom falls asleep before the tea cools. You tuck the blanket around his feet. You leave the rest of your shift to someone else. Tonight, you've had enough watching. Tonight, you let someone be warm. Tonight, as you walk your familiar path past shuttered shops and groaning tavern doors, you can't shake the feeling that the town is cracking, not from some grand catastrophe, but from tiny, everyday acts of desperation. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that quietly piles up in corners, like cobwebs in the rafters of a chapel no one visits anymore. You pass the smithy, where someone's tried to wedge a plank of wood into the lock. Poorly. The door's been kicked in. Inside, tools are missing, small ones: hammers, tongs, maybe a rasp or two. Nothing flashy, just useful things, just enough to keep working elsewhere. The smith is out back, cursing the rain, a hammer in one hand and his pride in the other. He says it's the third time this season. He's not mad about the tools, he's mad that he understands why someone would take them. That's when it hits you: you're not chasing villains. You're chasing people trying to stay afloat. Historians still argue whether crime rates in medieval towns were as bad as the chroniclers claimed. Some say it was mostly fear-mongering by the literate elite. Others believe the records were spotty, biased toward punishing the poor and protecting the powerful. Either way, the people who wrote history usually weren't the ones sneaking out at night with stolen bread or hammers in their pockets. You remember an old man from years ago, Jude, a wheelwright? Got caught stealing his own tools after being fired by his apprentice, who took over the shop when Jude's eyesight started going. The town jailed him for theft of property, even though he'd made half of it. You still think about him when you see empty wagons creaking through mud. Quirky tidbit: in some towns, a thief caught stealing during famine wasn't punished with imprisonment but forced to publicly confess and serve food at the next festival. It was a strange mix of humiliation and reintegration, part justice, part performance art. You find yourself staring at a notice nailed to a post near the square. It's a list of acceptable punishments for thieves: stocks, whipping, branding. In some places, exile. In others, an ear nailed to a post for a few hours if the thief was lucky. They could rip free before too much blood was lost. The sign even has a helpful drawing. Educational, you suppose. You wonder who wrote it. You wonder if they've ever missed a meal. Later, at the edge of town, you come across a figure slumped beside a trough. She's maybe 40, maybe older. Her face is hard to place beneath the grime. You gently shake her shoulder. She startles awake and immediately begins apologizing for what? You're not sure. She says her name is Bet. She used to mend clothes, still does, now and then. But cloth's expensive, and rich folk prefer new robes, not patched ones. Her fingers are good, though, fast, gentle. She stole a thimble one, just to keep working. The town guard broke her thumb. You offer her your torch. She laughs. What good is light if no one sees you? You give her half a loaf. She takes it like it might vanish. And as she eats, you think again not about how to stop theft, but how to stop hunger. The next morning, the mayor's clerk calls a meeting. Not a grand one, just a tight gathering of grumpy officials who smell like old wool and suspicion. There's been a rise in petty incidents. He says tools gone missing, grain sacks light, fish vanishing from market stalls. He uses the word conspiracy more than once, which always signals that someone's been reading too many scrolls and not watching enough streets. You're told to increase patrols, to be visible, to be stern. You nod, but your thoughts drift. Because what they call a conspiracy, you're beginning to see as something else: adaptation. People are sharing more, swapping skills. One man sharpens knives in exchange for eggs. A widow cooks stew for a carpenter who mends her gate. A woman with 6 chickens trades feathers for herbs. It's a quiet, invisible economy, and yes, sometimes it skirts the official grain tax, but it works for them, and it terrifies the people in power. Historians still debate the extent to which barter economies existed alongside formal ones in medieval towns. Some argue that peasant-level trading networks were essential to survival, but dismissed in written records. Others suggest these exchanges blurred the line between legality and necessity, where theft might just be commerce without permission. You pass by the river, where 2 boys are fishing with hooks made from bent nails. One offers you a perch as a thank you for not yelling last week. You accept it. You don't mention that it smells like it's had better days. You just smile. Then there's the baker who leaves an extra loaf behind the smithy once a week. Spoiled, he says loudly. Unfit for sale. Yet somehow, it's always wrapped neatly and still warm. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval towns, public ovens were guarded to prevent people from baking bread without paying a flour tax. But clever families baked flatbreads on heated stones at home and called them religious offerings. The officials couldn't argue with God. You start noticing these small rebellions everywhere. A borrowed cloak, a shared roof, a candle lit from a neighbor's flame. Technically illegal, morally unprosecutable. The town functions not because of its laws, but in spite of them. One night, a woman named Lena is caught with a pouch of honeycombs. She claims she found them near the woods. The mayor insists bees are town property. You suppress a laugh. Instead of jail, she's fined, more than she could ever earn. So you walk her home. She doesn't speak at first, just walks, cradling the empty pouch. Then she asks, "What happens when we all owe more than we can pay?" You don't have an answer, but you carry the pouch for her. It still smells sweet. That night, you lie awake in the guardhouse bunk, staring at the cracked ceiling. You think about the rules, the punishments, the system built on the assumption that fear keeps people honest. But you've watched enough hungry hands to know fear doesn't stop theft. Hope does. The hope that maybe tomorrow, you won't have to steal. You're not supposed to admire criminals. That's one of the first things they taught you. Admire the law. Admire order. Admire the way things are. But lately, you find yourself thinking about certain names with a peculiar fondness. Names whispered in alleyways, scribbled on the underside of tavern tables, etched into the bark of the old elm behind the apothecary. Take Red Tom, for instance. Not his real name, obviously. His real name is probably something disappointing like Jeffrey. But Red Tom, now that's a name. He was said to have stolen a pig from the bishop's courtyard and paraded it through town wearing a wig and rosary beads. The pig, not Tom, although knowing him, probably both. You don't even know if Red Tom's real, but you hope he is. Historians still argue whether the legendary outlaws of medieval Europe, figures like Robin Hood, Eustace the Monk, or Fulk Fitzwarren were real people, composites, or complete inventions. Most agree they served a social function, symbols of resistance, folk heroes of the downtrodden. Real or not, people needed them. And that's the thing, people want to believe in clever thieves, not cruel ones, not the ones who rob beggars or break bones, but the ones who outwit the greedy, who steal from the bishop and give bread to the blind baker, who turn law into a punchline. There's even a woman now goes by Bess the Broom. They say she sweeps into manor houses pretending to be a scullery maid and leaves with silverware tucked under her skirts. No one knows where she lives, but she always sends thank you notes. And the handwriting impeccable. You ask around, discreetly. Even the guards like her. One claims she left him a cake after she pilfered his keys. Best plum tart I ever had, he says wistfully. Quirky tidbit in parts of medieval Germany. Ballads about famous thieves were sung in marketplaces, often accompanied by dancing bears or toothless fiddlers. Authorities tried to ban them, but it only made the songs more popular. Turns out nothing spreads faster than forbidden music and bad rhyme. Back in town, someone's carved a crude drawing of Bess into a tree trunk complete with broom, winking eye, and a sack labeled justice. You can't help but smile. You wonder how many of these stories started with a simple act of survival, a stolen meal, a desperate plan, a choice between dignity and starvation. And somewhere along the line, the thief became a tale, and the tale became a comfort. Because when everything else is beyond your control, taxes, famine, cruel lords, it feels good to imagine someone is out there, breaking rules for you. Not against you. Sometimes, as you pass beneath the lantern light and the shadows stretch long behind you, you find yourself humming a tune. One of those outlaw songs. You don't know where you learned it. You just know it feels old, like it's always been there. Maybe Red Tom is real. Maybe Bess is just a tale told between mugs of ale and too little sleep. But either way, they're part of the town now, etched into its laughter, its whispers, its sighs. Just like you. You've grown quieter these days. Still alert, still dutiful, but quieter. Not just in voice though, that too, but in judgment. The kind of quiet that comes from watching 1,000 small injustices stack up like firewood. The kind that doesn't shout, but notices. Like when you pass the butcher stall and spot a girl handing over a tiny coin for a chunk of meat that's mostly bone. You see the butcher slip her a real cut instead shoulder. Maybe. Nothing is said. No one's looking. It's not charity. It's something older than that. A shared truth. A quiet agreement between the overworked and the underfed. You start calling these moments soft thefts. Not because they're harmless, but because they're done softly, deliberately, gently, like breaking a rule without breaking the world. Historians still debate the ethics of medieval theft. Some treat it strictly a breach of divine and civil order. Others point out that laws were often made for the rich, by the rich. What was theft to one man might be survival to another. And besides, who decided property was sacred in a world where people starved on church steps? You think about that more now. Take old Ralph, who runs the town's grain mill. He started leaving the back gate unlatched on Thursdays. No announcement, no posted sign, But word's gotten around. On Thursday nights, a few bags of grain tend to go missing, and Ralph, he just shrugs and blames the wind. Or Maudie, the brewer's widow, who forgets to lock her storage room when the beggar children pass by. She claims she's gone deaf. She hasn't. You've stopped reporting these things. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't see, but because you do. Quirky tidbit: in some medieval towns, guards were expected to provide their own uniforms, weapons, and even shoes. Many quietly accepted bribes not out of greed, but to simply afford the job. Corruption, then, wasn't always evil, it was often structural. You begin to see your uniform differently, not as armor, but as a disguise. A way to move through the town, not above it. A signal that you're a part of the system, but also, maybe, that you're watching the system crack. You still stop fights. You still chase true threats. But when a boy palms an onion or a mother tucks a roll beneath her shawl, you look the other way. Sometimes you even drop things: coins, gloves, food, just to see if someone else needs them more. You're not the only one. Other guards begin to change, too. Subtle things. One pretends to check doors longer than needed, giving folks time to slip away. Another spends a suspicious amount of time near the baker's refuse pile long enough, say, to keep the rats off, but not long enough to stop scavengers. No one talks about it, but it spreads. Kindness, after all, is contagious, even when it's illegal. And just like that, you've become part of something. Not an uprising, nothing dramatic like that. Just a quiet, invisible chorus of people choosing not to follow the rules when the rules feel cruel. It's the softest rebellion imaginable. A loaf handed over with a wink, a door left unlocked, a crime report conveniently misfiled. The town doesn't change overnight. The walls are still cracked. The poor still shiver. But there's something warmer in the air now, an unspoken trust. The kind that isn't taught or ordered or declared. The kind that grows in the gaps between punishments. The kind that makes life, if not easy, then at least survivable. You stop one evening by the shrine at the edge of town. There's a new carving there, crude, but careful. It's Bess the Broom again, this time drawn next to Red Tom. They're sharing a pie and laughing. Beneath them, someone has scratched the words, "We steal what they forget to give." Historians still argue whether towns like yours existed, places where order bent just enough to let compassion in. Some say no, that medieval justice was always cruel, always top-down. Others suggest these quiet resistances were everywhere, just never written down. Because those who kept the records rarely knelt beside rain barrels or swept crumbs from alley stones. You begin to think they were wrong about the Middle Ages. Not just the historians, but everyone who imagines it as nothing but filth and fire. Yes, there's hunger, and cold, and cruelty. But there's also something else. Something soft. Something stubborn. There's a kind of hope that lives in hand-me-down cloaks and mismatched candles. A resilience that blooms between market stalls and muddy streets. A quiet kind of love shared in crusts and glances and laughter that isn't supposed to exist. You see it every day now. In Denny, who brings Mira wildflowers he finds by the river. In Bet, who fixed the mayor's cloak without being asked. In Tom, who now sleeps in the guardhouse and insists on sweeping the steps each morning. He's terrible at it, but you let him. Quirky detail in some forgotten corners of medieval Europe. There were festivals where the world was turned upside down, peasants crowned kings, fools given thrones. The historians call them ritual inversions. But you think maybe, just maybe, they were practicing something bigger. A reminder that sometimes The world should be upside down. You head back to your post. Same torch, same boots, same cobbled streets. But now, you carry something else, too. Not guilt. Not pride. Just understanding. And the tiniest pouch of dream dust for emergencies. And now, the rain has faded, the streets have emptied, and the last candle in the tavern window flickers out. You're no longer walking, you're floating, gently, through the closing rhythms of a town that has, against all odds, held itself together through kindness and quiet defiance. You pass the smith's forge, glowing like an ember in the dark. You pass the alley where Denny once cried, now echoing with soft giggles and chalk drawings. You pass the door to the healer's hut, where someone has left fresh bread and a single daisy. The world hasn't become perfect. The laws still stand. Hunger still knocks. But tonight, you've seen how people survive between the cracks, how warmth blooms in shadowed places, and how rules sometimes loosen just enough for a little light to slip through. You are part of that now, not the enforcer, not the judge. Just one more soul doing their best to protect what little peace can be found between the cold and the hunger. So, as your torch flickers low and your feet grow heavy, let your eyes close gently. Let the wind hum like a lullaby outside your window. Let your breathing slow, syncing with the rhythm of distant footsteps on wet cobblestones. And know that even in a time of stocks and branding irons, of famine and fear, people still found ways to be kind. They still found ways to share, to forgive, to hope. And most of all, to survive.